are getting ready to take a little bit of a road trip, and I'm always looking for the good podcast recommendations. So I actually say we're not going to use, what podcasts have been something that you're listening to right now that have just been super encouraging or just fascinating, because those are good. I was listening to one about a worker in Uganda recently, and it's addicting. It was really challenging. I would love to just listen to it and talk to you guys all about it, because as I'm listening to it, I'm like having trouble debriefing it, and I'm trying to I just need to talk to somebody about this. But anyway, what are you guys listening to?
You should tell us the name of that one.
Yeah. Is it a podcast all about Uganda?
No. Okay. So it's actually one about a girl who was working there and was helping a home, creating a space for malnourished children. And now she's being accused of operating without a medical background and being held accountable for the lives that were lost, because potentially maybe she practiced without knowledge of what she was doing. And so, that is one that I've just been I'm like 5 episodes into it, and I'm like, I've got to stop. I need to listen to this with someone so I can chat about it. Yeah. But what about you guys?
I listened to the series by John Mark Comer and Jefferson Bethke. It's called Fight, Hustle, and Hurry. Unbelievably good. It's interesting because we are all sort of in a season of our lives where we're having to, where external circumstances are stopping hurry around us. But still, our hearts can hurry. That's what I'm discovering about myself,
That's good.
But this series is so great. Both of them just within the past year published books on the topic, and now they're joining together to do a podcast series. So highly recommend it. Fight, hustle, and hurry.
And Jefferson, they have really good platforms on Sabbath, right? And executing and organizing Sabbath.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I didn't realize they had a podcast, so that's also good to know.
Yeah.
I'm writing it down.
Yeah, I highly, highly recommend it.
Yes. All right. What kind of podcasts do you guys like? I find I like all sorts of them, but the investigative journalist ones are really intriguing as well.
Well, when Serial was out, I did love that. I don't know if people went through Serial, but I really love when people just interview people and you learn about people's stories and maybe what they're into in this season or what they've done and what the Lord has taught them through the season that they just came out of. So I really just like when people are chatting.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say one of my favorite podcasts. I don't ever really listen to it on a regular basis, but whenever I'm in a long road trip, I binge listen to it. It's called Ask Me Another, and it's just this trivia game show, and it is really fun.
Okay.
Ask Me Another.
Is that NPR?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of it. So I'm also writing this down.
Yeah. I've never listened to it.
I haven't either, but I think
Yeah.
A good podcast always makes those long car trips and the dishes go better.
Yes.
Amen.
Oh my goodness.
For me too, Denise. And cooking. I love listening when I'm cooking.
I know.
It really helps.
I really have appreciated, I got some earphones that are wireless, of course, not these, but then I just feel so free. I can just go about and fold laundry and mop and do whatever I need to do and multitask.
Really multitask, exactly.
Yeah. So good.
Getting a little ahead of myself, but one of the benefits of singleness and living alone, don't have to worry about the headphones.
Yeah.
Right.
Crank it up.
I want.
That's great. I love that.
Oh my goodness.
Well, that's so true. So many of my married friends are like, I don't have time to listen to podcasts, and I'm like, well, I got a lot of time for, doing alone tasks. So yeah, I like that.
That's so true. That's so true.
It is true. But yeah, I just had a baby in January, and I found now that I have a baby, it's harder to listen. And I do not like having cues. I don't like having podcasts waiting for me to listen to them. And now I have so many, it stresses me out. And we've been moving around a lot, so I don't have time to just like have my normal routine to listen.
Like get
so
your.
I need to go on a road trip.
Yeah.
Yes, although I'm sure that even that's not undistracted when you have a little one in the back seat.
Sure.
Right,
So,
exactly.
yes.
It's true.
But, well, we just want to welcome you all to this conversation today. Thank you so much if you're joining us live. I'm going to tell you that this is one of those conversations that I'm really excited about having. And I even was messaging these girls earlier. It's like, I'm so excited. I can't wait to have this conversation. So we are going to be talking about singleness and dating on the field. And honestly, there's a lot of conversations to be had about life on the field, but this is one of them where I feel like when you look at the number of just workers in general, and then how many of those are women? I think they're 2/3 of those are women that are on the field. And a significant chunk of those women are single or have served a significant portion of their time overseas as single. And yet the amount of time that we give to this topic is small in comparison. And so I am just really grateful to have this crew of women here with us today as we just serve this topic well, I hope. We have gathered who we think are some wonderful thinkers and some wonderful women who are going to be able to just talk openly and honestly about their experience with singleness and dating on the field. And what we realized as we were like laying out all of the potential places we could go with this is there's probably more than we're going to be able to chat through in an hour. And so we are going to talk about what is most important to us around this topic and things that we feel like have been shaping, the Lord's been shaping in our hearts, and how we want to kind of transport that knowledge out there for anybody to be blessed by it. But if there is something that you're tuning in live with us and you're like, I tuned in because I really care about this and I'm really struggling with this, or I need advice on this, we encourage you to ask that question in the comments early. We have found that sometimes in this format, people get brave at the end and want to get that question in, and we don't always have time to do that question justice. And so we would ask you to ask your question early if you're wanting to be sure it gets talked about. These wonderful women have agreed to pop on the comments after if we don't get to your question and just try to answer those in a more personal way in the comments. But if you'd like to hear us all chat about it, be sure to get that question in early. We're going to do a brief little round of introductions, and then hopefully some of the stories of these ladies will come through as they answer questions. So I'm Denise Beck. I get to be the executive director here at Velvet Ashes, and we just really believe that we want to give women courage to thrive in unlikely places, and we do that through a lot of ways, but one of them that we're trying out this summer is the Summer Live series. So we hope that you're blessed by that. Sarah Hilkeman. Sarah, give us a wave. So Sarah's our program coordinator. Sarah, tell a little bit about what you're going to be doing during this chat today.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so glad you guys are hopping on live with us or joining, watching later. So I will be hanging out in the comments with you. So like Denise said, if you have a question or a thought, go ahead and put that in the comments, and I will make sure that we chat about that on our call today, on our live today. Just so you know a little bit about me, so I'm not the random person in the comments with you. I was on the field in Southeast Asia for 5 years as a single, and am now back in my passport country and am still single. So.
Thank you, Sarah. And just so you guys know, we can't see your comments. Sarah's the only connection to the comments. So as she reads them, she might interrupt us. If you don't understand something or want something repeated, she's going to be the one that connecting us to your comments today on the screen. Danny, give us a little bit of an introduction.
Hi, I'm Danny. I live in Southeast Asia currently. I'm still here. And yeah, it's been interesting in the midst of a pandemic, but yeah, it's good. And yeah, I've been here for 5 years teaching English, and I just started a role directing our short-term programs for our Southeast Asia region. And
Which I'm sure is interesting, directing that in the midst of this weird travel season. So thanks for staying up late with us tonight.
Yeah.
Yes. Maria, tell us about yourself.
Hey, I'm Maria. I am currently back stateside, living in South Carolina. I spent 6 years of my life also in Southeast Asia, kind of in two chunks. The most recent chunk, I just moved back to the States about 3 months ago. So I'm kind of in the middle of re-entry. Really wishing I could breathe the air that Danny is breathing tonight, that thick, sultry Southeast Asian air. But grateful to be where I am right now too. I am single, spend all my time on the field, single as well. And yeah, happy to be on this call.
Thank you, Maria. And Lauren and I actually got to be neighbors when we were in South Sudan together. And so it's extra special for me to get to see her face here this morning. So Lauren, go ahead and introduce us and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Denise. Yes, hi everyone. My name is Lauren, and I live currently we are living in Uganda in East Africa. I got married in 2018, and but the majority of my time, about 6 years, while being in East Africa, I was single. Met my husband overseas, and then we got married, and we live in northern Uganda. We are back stateside. We came back about 3 weeks ago for a family wedding, and then hope to return back to Uganda shortly. I work in education, and my husband works in agriculture. I'm excited to talk about this topic just because of the life that I have lived as a single overseas, and the calling that the Lord had for me, and I know has for us as we go anywhere in this world and serve him and his people. And then the whole shift of then getting married and changing life in a new way overseas as a wife and as a mother.
Thank you, Lauren. All right, guys, I'm just going to jump right in. So one of the things I think that it's really, really good to point out is that sometimes singleness and marriedness can be what defines us. And yet, while that might separate out how we live our lives on the field, the truth is that we're all really asking the same questions about it's going to be hard to live a life overseas. And is the Lord enough for me to trust with whatever those hardships are, whether that's single and the hardships that come with that, or married and the hardships that come with that. And so on the bare level, we are all the same. We are all women who are following what we feel like we are being called to do and asking the Lord, are you enough? Is my faith and my trust in you enough to help me with whatever hardships that might be? And so while we will be addressing hardships about marriage next week, this week, we're going to just be talking about the joys and the hardships of being single. And we're going to have women tuned in here who are going to be in all stages of this. They're going to be those that are actually still in their passport country and saying, can I do this? I'm asking that question is, if I say yes to this, am I saying no to ever getting married if I'm not married before I go? And so, what would you say, Danny, especially, you just recently re-entered Southeast Asia. And so you were going through that whole process of deciding to go and making that commitment. What would you say to girls who are actually at that point right now saying, if I say yes to this, what am I saying no to something else?
Yeah. Kind of bluntly, you are kind of saying no to something else. And it doesn't mean that you'll never get married, but yeah, I think when I think about it, it's just thinking about like, I'm prioritizing the Father and serving the Father instead of prioritizing marriage. And yeah, so it does make it a lot harder when you're overseas, but it's definitely not impossible. But yeah, you just definitely have to think a mindset like, who am I really serving? And in the end, what does it matter? Like, so what if I never get married? Like, that's not my goal in life. My goal in life is to like worship and serve and live for him. And yeah, I think it's so great when people make that decision, and you can do it, and it's totally possible to serve single.
Would Maria or Lauren talk about your experience in actually making that decision as single women to go overseas. Was that a factor in your decision?
Yeah, that was a big deal for me. I remember actually my pastor asking me, like, he just kind of went there. He was like, how is this for you? You know, which I appreciated, you know, kind of him wading into that, him and his wife. But like, I think something that was really key for me is in the time when I was preparing to move overseas, one of my very best friends was also preparing to move overseas as a married woman and a mom of a few kids. And it was so good for me to see like the difficulties in that stage also in making this big transition. And because it's easy sometimes to look at it through our own eye, through our own lens, like, oh, I'm potentially giving up marriage. I'm walking into this thing alone, and that's really scary. And, you know, all of those things. It was so good for me to walk it alongside of a woman who was doing it in a different stage of life, and to see how hard it was, the hard things she had that I didn't have. So I think that was something actually that really helped me a lot, is to see like any part of this, you know, this is it. Yeah, it's about obedience to the doors the Lord is opening and asking you to walk through. And there are definitely things in our particular season that are going to be hard, but there are things in all seasons that are going to be difficult. That was really good for me. So I'd say, have your best friend move with you, move somewhere overseas in a different stage of life, and you can kind of see that. I know that's crazy advice, but that was my experience.
It was not a factor. I moved overseas right after college, so I was 22, and was just very much ready for adventure and opportunity and to learn what was ahead of me. And then I moved back to the US to go to graduate school, and knew I wanted to go back overseas. And that's when I moved to South Sudan and met Denise and her family. So it wasn't at all on my radar to say, I want to stay in the US because I want to get married. I was very much excited about the work that I was able to do. And it was a lot of hard work. And if I was married, I wouldn't have been able to do it. Life is really different now. We moved to a different part of Uganda recently, last year, because of my husband's work. So I had to give up my work in East Africa, in Eastern Uganda. So it just definitely more compromise. When I was finished in South Sudan, I moved to the US for a couple of months, thinking that I would be there for several years, but I didn't want to keep living in the US. And so I moved back to the US, moved back to East Africa, to Uganda for work. And I just really loved that work. But my mom asked me when I left that third time, she's like, aren't you concerned you won't meet anybody? But I really wasn't. I was just thrilled for what was ahead. And I mean, the Lord provided what he provided as far as community and opportunity and just a lot of fulfillment. So I was really grateful to, just feel very full in that. And I didn't feel like I was giving up anything, actually. And it wasn't always in the forefront of my mind is, am I going to get married? I did end up getting married, and it's such a joy, but it definitely changed a lot of the work and the vision that I had for what life was going to be like for me overseas.
Yeah. And, you know, Lauren, I remember, I think it was your birthday. So every year on your birthday, you do this thing, or you used to do this thing where you just like think back on your
That's
year.
Right. Yeah.
And
good.
you like thank the Lord for what that was. And you take a day and you just kind of pray about what the next year is going to hold for you. And I remember, and then you come and you tell people what they meant to you during that year.
Yeah.
And I remember, you know, you were just talking about that. And that was something at the time when you were like facing this decision of, you know, it is something that you think about every year as you're evaluating your life. It's like, you know, is this something that I feel like the Lord's asking me to switch my focus to, you know, marriage, or am I still, this is my work and I'm being called to do that? And I remember you just kind of talking through that, and you were just like, I don't feel like he's asking me to switch my focus to focus on trying to find someone to marry. It's still, this is what he's given me to do. And I've always remembered that and appreciated that about you. It's like, you know, maybe that's not the same answer he would give everybody, but for you, it was like you were so sure of what he's asked you to do. And so you didn't have to obsess about this one thing that wasn't in your life when you were looking at all that he had given you. And so,
yeah, thanks for remembering that.
So one of the things that you kind of touched on, Maria, is the fact that, you know, there are challenges, but there are some joys and some things that are possible because of your singleness. Would you just expound a little bit on that?
Sure. I'd love to. I think this is like so often when we talk about singleness, we talk about what we don't have. And I just love when the conversation, like, don't ignore that, you know, those are true things to grieve and to process. But I love when the conversation turns then to what we do have. And for me, my experience on the field, like, I found like my like national friends, I think they looked at me as like this single woman so far away from my family, and they extended friendship and love and kindness to me so like quickly. I think more quickly than had they looked at me and said, you know, oh, she also has her husband and she has children, like that kind of thing. Like, I mean, as a single woman, I got invited on family vacations with friends, you know, just brought into like friend groups so much more quickly, with like my friends there from my host culture. And I observed that the married women who came in with the very same heart and intention to serve, to, you know, really get involved with people, that it took longer. And not only because they were busy with their other things, but also because of how they were viewed. Now, I know could be different. It's probably a different situation in every culture, but that was my experience. And I really came to see it as like, wow, you know, that is a real like wonderful blessing of being a single woman on the field. Is you, I found in my experience, I think I was brought into families and friend circles more easily and naturally than it would have been had I had my own family to care for. So that was a huge blessing for me. Huge.
That is a huge blessing. Danny, what have you found in the blessings of singleness, besides that you don't have to use earphones when you listen to podcasts?
Yeah.
So many things. Kind of going off of what Maria just said, I feel like, especially with just local believers, a lot of women are single here because it's really hard to find another believer.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, just really resonating with them and being able to build relationships with them, and encourage them is a really big blessing for me. And then on another one, I feel like we talk about a lot, it's just, we really do have so much freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have to consult anyone. I don't have to worry about like, oh, I want this friend to come over. Like, let me make sure like everyone else is okay with it. Like, it's just me. So I can be like, I'm okay with it, so you can come over. Or if someone invites me to come to visit their hometown, like I can just say yes without having to worry about other responsibilities. And yeah, it really just, there's so much freedom in that, and you can use that to just serve the people.
Sarah, how are we doing on comments? Anything that we need to make sure that we're chatting about?
One question that just came in was what you guys would say to supporting fellowships back home, or even sending organizations. What do they need to know to really support singles well, both on the field and at conferences or on home assignment?
Anybody have thoughts on that? Maybe you had a good experience with that, or an area where you're like, this was really bad and I'd love to share about that.
I think one thing I would say is like having maybe kind of evaluate like how decisions are made or how like news travels. Like a lot of sometimes that stuff kind of just happens naturally with like, oh, there's kind of a group of men together and most of the women are represented there like by their husband. Like, don't forget the single woman is not represented in that conversation or in that kind of thing. I think just an awareness of like that there is, especially in the overseas worker world, there is just a really large portion of single women, and how like evaluate how their voice is being heard, how news is being transferred to them, whether that's through an organization or at an organizational level or through a sending church. That's something I think it can sometimes fall through the cracks, probably unintentionally. But just an open evaluation of that, I think, is good.
I think you make a good point in that, we talked about the largest percentage of workers being women, and yet the largest percentage of team leaders being men, and even training for how team leaders can better lead women and single women, because there is a little bit of that awkwardness of, if I do a one-on-one check-in with the single woman, how is that looking and how do I do that well? And so, maybe even some training for those team leaders about how to be sensitive to that and do that well.
I'll add on to that. That's a really important question that the commenter asked. I would say I had a pretty good, especially living in South Sudan, I had a really good organization that I worked for. And one thing, though, that I would have wanted, and I did speak up about this, is that there was very much a divide between me as a single lady and then the married families living on the compound in the capital that we lived in when I was there my first year. And so they got furniture in their house and they had a kitchen. I didn't have any of that. And so I had to really advocate for having those resources. And I simply just didn't get them because I didn't have a family or because I wasn't married. So just treating people with equality. I wasn't less than because I wasn't married. And so just seeing that, having the organization, the sending organization, the sending church, whatever it is, recognize that single people, single ladies, single men, whatever, have the same desires and want to live life in a sustainable way as much as a married couple might want to. Yeah. So just addressing that.
And maybe, even Lauren, on that, not assuming that just because they're single, they want to live with somebody else.
Right.
I think a lot of times organizations want to pair all of the single people in one place together. And, when you reach, an age where you're like, I'm ready to live on my own. And just because I'm not married, it doesn't mean I want to always have a roommate. But, some people they may appreciate that, but maybe opening the door to that conversation as well.
That's a great point. Yeah.
And kind of, I would add on to that. I love what you're saying. And for me, as a single woman in my early 20s, I would have felt very differently about some of these things as I feel now, in my late 30s. But sometimes it can kind of feel like we're all just kind of in one, well, this is how we should do with the single women, kind of thing.
Right.
And, just an awareness and an understanding of the stages within singleness that people are at. Yes. I think that really makes me feel like valued and honored when there's kind of this understanding that, well, yeah, Maria, she's single, but, she might actually be wanting a kitchen in her home. Right. When I was 22, I didn't care. But now I care. Like, kind of that understanding of the different stages, I think is good.
You bring a good point because, there are natural stages built into married life that women pass through, like married with toddlers, or you're teaching, or your kids are moving out. So it's empty nest. So that is a progression that allows people to wrap their mind around, this is a new season, this woman's viewing things differently in this season. And yet there are seasons that you pass through just in general as you gain knowledge and experience and all of that. So that's a really great point to bring out, to be aware of. So one of the things that I valued as a married person on the field with children about single team and single expats that we lived around was the fact that I recognize in myself the inability to transfer every possible gift to my child because I don't possess every possible gift. And yet there are these amazing women that I would want to pour into my kids. And Lauren was one of those for us who fulfilled that investing in our kids. And she was able to give them things that I couldn't just because I didn't possess them. And sometimes, those can come from other married women. But what I appreciated so much was just that I get to have these amazing people pour into my children and become things that I can't be to them. And so, as a married person who worked around and got to enjoy having other single expats around, what advice would you want married people and families to know about how to serve and love you well? If you're serving and investing in their family, how can they serve and invest in you well?
For me, I feel like definitely it's one of the hardest parts about being single is you do a lot alone, and like you process alone, you come home at the end of your day, you're alone, you don't have anyone to talk to about it. And yeah, I feel like having like a family invite me in to be a part of their family is really just something that can serve singles well. Because we're away from our family back in our passport country, and we don't really have like a family here, but as a body, like we are each other's family. And just making sure you're inviting them over for dinner or just even to be a part of your life. Like it doesn't have to be some special occasion. Like even if you're just like doing your daily chores and are like, hey, like just come over and hang out with me. And then I think too, just on that one, like thing I hear back from married people and like specifically married people with children is that they're like, oh, I don't like want my kids to bother you. And I feel like, not making those assumptions about single people. Like, like I feel like there's so many assumptions, like you don't want to be around my kids. And it's like, no, like we're fine. Like we want to be around your family. We want to serve you. We want to like be like an aunt or a single guy's like an uncle to your kids. And so just not worrying about your family or what your house looks like and just assuming that we do want to be a part of your life.
Maria, Lauren, what advice would you give on that?
I think, Danny, you did a really good job. I'll just touch on what Denise and her family and team did really well is they had pizza night every Saturday night. And in a land where you feel like you almost have nothing and really nobody's around, it was just really nice to walk up the street. And I had a couple of teammates who are also single, and we would go up there and just have great family time. Her husband, Denise's husband, did a little Bible study or just shared from the word. And we had community time. So being included for me, more it would be just being included. I think Danny touched on it with meals and with checking in and just showing that you're also a human who needs community and love. That was really important and just really special. Those nights were special.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those. And it's interesting that both of you talked about kids. And that's actually a big thing for me too. There were a few families who they just shared their children with me so well. And about makes me kind of get teary, but they called me Aunt Maria. And I was missing my nieces and nephews like crazy. And I had these kids who would these families they just shared them with me. I got invited to birthday parties, and that was just so special. I think that was a way, and I would just really say that to, if you're married on a team with singles, I know every person is different. For me, I really love children, and that was a big void in my life that I left when I left my home. And so them kind of acknowledging that and saying, I'm going to share my kids with you. That was huge to me. It really was. Oops, I just lost my headphones. But yeah, just that bringing in, and also I would just say, like, you know, asking. Holidays are hard. Holidays are probably are hard for everybody. But you know, when you're the only one in your family far away, and then just a word like to us singles, like, also don't be afraid to ask. Like, I think sometimes I wait for my married people to come and ask me, when actually I really just ask. Say, can I just come over to your house for dinner tonight? You know, I just need like something normal around me. Because maybe they don't have any clue. Maybe they think, oh, it must be nice to eat in the middle, to eat in a quiet meal, you know, where we're just kind of like longing for like the chaos of life and whatever around us. Like, to the married people, I'd say ask, and to the single people, I'd say ask. You know, kind of in both ways.
Please go, Danny. Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, just to add on to that, yeah, I feel like even as a single person, so earlier we were talking about resources, and I always get the name of this book wrong, but I think it's the 7 myths. It's either the 7 myths about singleness or of singleness, something like that. Mm-hmm. And it talks about this a little bit about, like how married people and singles can kind of like serve each other. And it talks about asking, and yeah, just thinking about that too, like you can get really practical. Like, I think sometimes when I go to dinner with a family, sometimes I'm like, oh, they're always the one making me dinner. But like, you can offer, like, especially with kids, sometimes it's hard because they can't come to our house. Like, it's much easier for a single person to go to a family instead of like them buckling their kids in the car and coming. But like, you can offer to make dinner for them and bring it to their house, or even be like, hey, can I borrow your kitchen and I'll cook dinner for you at your house? Yeah. And so just as a single, like, thinking of how can we make it easier for us to go to a family, like, so like, yeah, so because I think that's the hard part, is like that time, like they're busy, we're busy, and it's just hard. And just in practical ways, like, how can I make it easier for us to include each other, like, together?
I would say yes and yes and yes to all of that, because I found that sometimes when you're like trying to raise kids and do all of the things and make sure your husband isn't burning out, and oh yeah, we don't have any food and we have to go to the market, and that wears me out in general. And all of that, sometimes it just slips your mind to think about hospitality for those that you are working with. You know, your mind is always on, you know, hospitality to those that you're there to serve. But then I personally loved it when somebody would just say, can I come over? Can I do this? Your home makes me feel safe. Can I just spend the weekend with you? You know, like things like that. It was like, yes, absolutely, 100 times yes. Always ask, because my heart would always be to say yes and want that. But sometimes it was just, my brain was not capable of thinking of one more thing at that moment on that day. And so, I even find like I'm that way with my friendships. It's like if somebody were just to ask something, I would say yes to anything. And I just sometimes don't even think about the things. And that's just like a little bit about my personality. And some people aren't like that. But so yes, I would just say, I'm assuming that there are other people, married people, that are like that as well. That, you know, you might find that there's tension with something that you have to get worked out with. But on a whole, I would say the answer would be yes for most married people on the field. So, Sarah, before we move on to another subject, do we have anything we need to chat about?
Well, and this might be your next topic, but there are lots of questions about dating on the field. So just in general, tips to not make it weird, but also dealing with differences in culture, not necessarily dating someone from the local culture, but just if you're in a place where they have arranged marriages. And so the Western style of dating is really different. So just kind of dealing with some of those dynamics.
Boy, that's a broad one. That's really, and a really personal one for each team and location. But what are your experiences or thoughts that you've had about dating in general overseas? And then Lauren, I'd love for you to speak on even how did that work for you?
Sure. Well, I never dated anybody from the local culture in East Africa, but I definitely had little relationships with people, with two guys in particular when I was living overseas prior to getting married. And it just never worked out, which is fine. And then but I think I was looked down upon a lot by our local culture, like, oh, you have to go on and you have to get married because you're getting older and this is what you need to do in life. And so then I met my current husband in 2017, and he left Uganda to go to graduate school. So he was back in the US, and so we dated long distance. And then we would just go back and forth. And it was honestly awesome because having the long distance communication, you really have to dig in ways that you don't dig in maybe if you are face to face with somebody on a regular basis. So it really helped us, and just meeting somebody overseas in the same culture and or the same context, our hearts were very much aligned, our visions were aligned. So we kind of cut through a lot of the what is your purpose or interest on a shallow level, and just really got to, and we were getting older. So, and so you just kind of sift through, I don't know, more of the shallow things, and you just say, is this going to work? Like ultimately our vision for this relationship would be marriage. And it was actually a really, I mean, it was hard at times, but it was really a beautiful gift. And I will touch on the local culture because in East Africa, there's a lot of secrecy around relationships. And I worked with high schoolers and college students in the last several years. And so just being able to date and then get engaged and get married, it really gave me an opportunity to speak into the lives of the students I worked with in a new way, and just to really encourage them and maybe even challenge them in the way that they were living in secrecy in their relationships. Or you would have one guy that would be dating 5 different girls, and he wouldn't tell any of the other girls he was dating other girls, and just the pain that the girls went through. And so it was really, I was really grateful for the opportunity to then have that platform in what I was experiencing to work with the students, and hopefully help and support them on a more personal level as far as their relationships were concerned. So kind of the blending of cultures of how we do dating and engagement and marriage in the West, and then how I saw it was happening in East Africa, and just working together to challenge and encourage the students I was working with.
So Lauren, when you talk about a culture that it is kind of bathed in secrecy when you're dating somebody, how do you encourage a worker who maybe it's not long distance, but somebody is there and they don't, I mean, because, when he's not there, you're not going to a coffee shop together and worried about, oh, are our friends going to see us, or are our national friends going to see us? And like, how would you suggest, like, any advice for navigating when you're right there together? Do you have conversations about that with the nationals and help them to understand the benefit of not keeping things in the dark? Or what would you say to somebody who's trying to navigate that on the field right now without the long distance aspect?
Well, I the way that I feel like I did it and worked is just really having honest and open dialogue and communication. I think it really helped that I had relationships, like pretty good relationships with a lot of the students that I was counseling or was advising in some degree. So just, I guess my ultimate advice would just be to be honest and open. And if we had many situations where the girls were dating these guys who were not treating them well. And so just, I don't know, I would mediate conversation between them, and just having this opportunity to be honest. And honestly, it's just showing, a lot of it earlier on was showing I worked at a high school. And so showing that the guys, and trying to really have good lessons on why a girl in school or in general was an asset to society. And then also really reinforcing the value that God gives ladies. And so I think a lot of it also came back to that, like that having their understanding of purpose and value that God's given them, from the man to understand the female and from the female to understand herself. And then just being able to be honest and going back to scripture and saying, this is how God values you, and how he's treating you is not right. And so we're going to have dialogue or conversation about that. So just choosing to be honest. And then I was very open in my relationship as in many ways, as far as communication and physical boundaries, and how I was treated in dating and engagement and marriage, and just being able to talk about that primarily with the girls I worked with, but honest communication and what we, my husband and I, felt was biblical, not just what we would necessarily say is right, but let's go back to scripture. What does the Lord say?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want to put, Danny, Maria, but feel free to jump in if you have anything to say. I don't want to put you on the spot, but some of the questions I have, and maybe other people have as well, is, what do your teams and your organizations have to say about singles and dating? And are there any guidelines like, hey, you know what, you need to be connected to a family and doing dates in public where they're getting to know them as well? And it's, are there any things like that you would say, hey, generally this was how I've seen it done healthily, or these are guidelines that are put in place to help with that on our team or organization?
Yeah. So I think it's kind of hard. Our organization, or my organization, they ask that your first year that you don't date if you're not already dating someone. So you don't have to stop dating someone if you come in and already are. But yeah, so they ask that you don't date your first year on the field, just so that you can really focus and dive in and build relationships and just be all there. But after that, you're free to date. We do have guidelines about dating locals. They ask you to wait a little bit even longer to date a local. But yeah, so after your first year, you're free to date. Most people in my organization, I think it's maybe a few exceptions. Everybody else is always long distance. I've dated in the past, and it's always been someone I've met through my organization, and long distance. So I think it's really, we don't have a lot of guidelines about dating, when you're in the same location, because it's usually you're not. Yeah. But I feel it's just kind of how you would date in America, pretty much the same, just being careful and open and honest with people. And I feel I really appreciate that. It's just normal. We don't have a lot of here's what you need to follow, but I think we really trust our people to just to follow their faith in dating.
Well, and I can imagine the complications of if there were dating within the same team, because of those emotions being high. And if it didn't work out, you are still working together, and the extra careful layers that you would probably want to put in place before you did proceed with a dating relationship on your team. One question I wonder about too is, at what point do you choose to share that information in a broader scale? So you've got supporters, you've got sending organization, you've got church, when does that make the newsletter?
Not for a while.
That's a good question. Well, for me, it took months. And so I told close friends that I was I was teaching at the time, so I think I told my students when I started back to school. I was working in the university, and the school started in August, and I started dating in June. And then shared it, I guess, broader, in the broader scheme of support and of global and local friendship, and probably 5 months in. Because it's true, Denise, I think you do have to be really careful. And you do want to obviously protect the situation, keep some privacy, but then just being able to be held accountable and to not want to live in secrecy, and really to get good counsel and mentorship feedback was really important for us. Yeah.
And you don't want to have the first time that you mention it be, oh, and I'm getting married.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. Exactly. That's very true. Exactly.
I have never gotten too much into a serious relationship that I felt the need to report it to people back home. But I was talking to a friend recently, and yeah, she was just talking about how there's a struggle to tell people back home, because especially people that support you, because you don't want them to think you're coming on the field to date. There's this balance of I'm still focused on my work.
Yes.
And
Right.
yeah, how do you communicate that with people back home? And there's this fear that they're going to judge you, or you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You didn't go there to get married and date, you went there to serve. And so, yeah, I think there is that fear in singles who are dating and getting into a more serious relationship of what will people back home think of me now?
So for that, if it is somebody's desire that, hey, I want to stay here, but I also want to get married, and there are fewer ways maybe to meet that person, and if it is through your organization or through back home or through there's also these things that are the dating websites for workers overseas. What do you guys think about that, and any experience with that?
I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, I didn't know that was a thing either. Specifically for
Yes.
overseas people? Oh, wow.
Yep.
I didn't know. Okay.
I don't have any experience with it, but I have two friends that joined. They are not on it now. It didn't go anywhere. I think they just found it more challenging. So, I can't speak to that, but it isn't, you would think it could be a great opportunity to meet people, because you probably are more than likely like-minded and have similar vision or purpose. And a big thing I know, and I just met my now husband, he was, moving to go back to the U.S., go to grad school. And I was like, well, just so you know, I'm not leaving East Africa. It was just the number one prerequisite for even dating. And so I would think that maybe a website like that would kind of sift through some of the initial, I don't know, expectations or whatever.
Yeah, I think too, I would be really cautious. For me, I noticed overseas in general, there is this big pressure on getting married. I think even that same fear of telling supporters back home that you are entering into the serious relationship. There's also a flip side to that, where you go back home and they're like, oh, did you meet somebody? And you're just no, I didn't. And there's a lot of pressure from people on the field, off the field, for you to meet someone and get married. And I feel especially when you go to online dating, there's not anything necessarily wrong with online dating, but I feel sometimes we go to that because we feel so much pressure. So I think really asking yourself, why am I doing this? Is it because I feel I'm supposed to get married, or is it because hey, yeah, this is a great way to meet new people and it could lead to something, and you're just doing it out of that interest rather than I feel I'm supposed to get married? Because I feel for me, I'm perfectly content in my singleness until I talk to someone that's oh, don't you want to get married? You should get married. You really need to be married. And then all of a sudden I'm oh, should I, oh, and then I feel bad, oh, I need that thing, when before I had that conversation, I was perfectly content and fine.
Yeah.
You bring up a good thing, Danny. One of the things that I have learned from talking with different people in this, seasons of serving and coming back is it's not that it's you wrestle with it once and you're good. Is that, there might be a season when you're totally content and totally happy, and then a few years later it hits you and you're I thought I worked through this. I thought I was good. And, and that you might have to come to that conversation with the Lord and be all right, we're here again. And now we're bringing it up again and we're going to work through it again. And you're either going to bring me back to that place of contentment, or you're going to show me that there's something different that you have for me. And that not to feel like you've failed or that it's, you know, you did something wrong. If it comes back up and you wrestle with it again, you know, just like we talked about earlier, there's seasons, and maybe you're content for this season and you're not for the next one. And that's okay too, you know. And I love what you said. I feel like that's another piece of advice for either people on the field or your standing organizations or your supporters, is you don't always have to try to be a matchmaker for me and try to hook me up with somebody. And don't let that be the first question you ask me when I get back is, did you meet somebody? You know, because there's that's not why I was there. There's so many other rich stories I'd love to tell you and talk about instead of that. That is not what's branded on my forehead that you see the first thing when I get off of the plane, you know, and recognizing it comes from a place of, I'm so happy as a married. I think that I want you to be happy. And so I want good things for you. But when you haven't had that experience of contentment as a single, you can't understand that as well, you know. And so, you know, I guess grace both ways for that. Sarah, I know we're getting toward close to the end of our hour, but are there any things that we can do before? I'd love for you guys to just be able to give some resources or suggestions for ladies who are going to watch this and want to dig deeper into this.
Yeah, there's lots of good comments and good responses, and definitely more that we could dig into. But I think, yeah, if you guys have final thoughts or resources to share, that would be great.
Yeah, so Danny, you mentioned this book. What other resources, podcasts, articles, people to follow on social media that speak well on this topic?
Yeah. A podcast that I listened to a while ago, but I feel like it's been like a year or so and it's still really stuck with me, is this podcast, Go and Tell. And I sent it to Sarah. I can't remember the episode number, so hopefully she can put that in.
Yeah, but it's going in the comments.
Perfect. But yeah, it was about this girl. She is a single foster mom, and just her story of being a single foster mom. And she's a foster mom to these two girls that if she had been married, she would not be able to be their foster mom, because in the foster care system, like, some children cannot go to homes with the opposite gender. And so, yeah, like, she would not have been able to be their foster mom. And it just was so eye-opening that there are really things that you can only do if you're single. And yeah, just like how encouraging that is. And marriage is awesome. And there are things that are gifts to marriage, but there are also gifts to singleness. And yeah, that podcast really like just resonated with me. And there's just opening my eyes and reminding myself, like, hey, I might not be able to do this if I were married, and just being thankful for that. And then one other resource that I feel kind of awkward sharing about, but I recently wrote an article for a magazine called Deeply Rooted. And so I wrote specifically about how we can disciple as single women and be role models specifically for younger girls, and yeah, connecting with families. So yeah, specifically like discipling others as a single woman. So yeah.
And is that out?
Yeah, it is officially out. You have to like pre-order the magazine, and they're shipping a little slowly just because of the pandemic, but you can go on their website and order it. So
okay,
that's
cool.
Awesome.
Fantastic. That's so exciting.
That's awesome.
That's very good.
Maria, Lauren, any resources you'd want to get out there? Dump them all.
Yeah, I have a book I recommend. I sent the title and the author to Sarah. I think she'll pop that in the comments. It's called Thrive by Lena. I'm afraid I can't remember how to pronounce her last name, but if you look in the comments, you can see it. I find like there's a lot of really good books and stuff out there for singles. A lot of them are around the theme of like surrender, you know, kind of like surrendering our dream for marriage or for family or things like that. And those are really good. And in some seasons, that's really, really where I'm at. But I felt like this book took it to the next level then, like looking at just even the name, you can kind of see that also. Thrive. What are things in this season that how can we cultivate, how can we cultivate the gift of hospitality as a single woman? A lot of times we think about that in the context of a family, but it doesn't have to be. How can we stay, not let loneliness be kind of like a crutch that we can use? I just found that book to be really encouraging. Now, I will say there are, like Denise, you mentioned seasons. That is so true. And there are seasons where that book is like, oh, this isn't what I need. I need that book about surrender first. But yeah, another really popular author right now, Annie F. Downs. I love her perspective on singleness. I feel like she is so honest about the things that are like hard. And she lives her life with such joy. I love following her on Instagram and her podcasts. I feel like she is, in my opinion, she is a great voice to the church in these days of being a single woman. So that's somebody I'd advise you to follow. And that book, there's a lot of other good stuff, but those are two things I think of offhand.
And Maria, I'm adding a conversation between Annie F. Downs and Joe Saxton that was on YouTube. They talked about friendships between married women and single women and just how beautiful they can be, where you don't have to worry about the labels, your relationship status. You just know each other as people. Yes. So that's another great resource from Annie.
Yeah. Cool.
I don't have much I think that's great, Maria. I really would advocate for Annie Downs too, because she does speak really honestly about singleness and life. Yeah. I can't say I really read books on singleness, or really I didn't have a ton of focus on it before I was married. I think maybe what I did, I don't know if it was really intentional or maybe it was informally intentional, but just really to focus on the life that God was building in me internally. And so just dealing with, I really never thought I'd get married. And so it was just really self-discovery and where God had me and what he was doing to break down things in my past or really unlearn to then relearn truth. So, I mean, there are a couple of books that I can share, but they're definitely not about singleness or dating or marriage or anything like that. So 2 books that I would say that I really loved were The Inner Voice of Love by Thomas Merton, and then The Gift of Being Yourself by David Benner. And they're both more contemplative, but really beautiful books on inner spirituality. And then just really being, I know I didn't, so Sarah, I can even write them again for you or write them for you. But I think also just building community and building relationships. And like Maria was saying, if you love hosting, host, right? Yeah, and so I try to do that as much as possible. If you love cooking, cook. If you, love watching kids, then watch kids, even if they're not your kids, whatever it was. So just, building that life. And I see now how the Lord did use the seasons before I even knew marriage was coming, to really work on me internally and to hone in on those skills that I really loved and had before marriage. And then also just the gift of really working and building community in a more intentional way. I know that earlier Danny had mentioned about freedom, and you do just have such greater freedom as a single person. And spending time in work and in community at work was so much more. I mean, I thrived more there than I do now being married. And it's okay that I'm not there now, but just really taking advantage of that and feeling so grateful for what those seasons were, because now I don't have them anymore. So just practicing gratitude in each season, I guess, too.
Well, honestly, this is good for my heart too. I mean, who doesn't need to practice gratitude in each season for what we have? So
that's right.
I hope that this has been a blessing to those of you who are turning in live. I have been really blessed by this and so encouraged. And I find that girls that I'm talking to that are looking to go are more brave and more courageous now than I remember them being. And I think it's because of people like you that are speaking about the truth about it, the encouragement about it, the joys about it, and they're not believing lies that they have to be married in order to be effective. And so thank you for being willing to be bold and speaking about this for women that are going now. So Velvet Ashes community, we're excited to be able to join you in this way. We look forward to next week talking about the joys and blessings and hardships of navigating wedded bliss overseas. So we hope that you will join us again next week for that. Ladies, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.